very interesting show tonight about a topic that I think we all have a vested interest in. We're going to talk about intimacy and specifically about the challenge of intimacy. With me tonight is James Breyer, who is a psychologist, a licensed psychologist from St. Cloud, Minnesota. He came down tonight to discuss this topic, which is a topic near and dear to your heart.
Definitely.
You teach and work in this field. You've taught, James, at about
5 different places.
5 different colleges, universities, this area, relationships.
Mostly while I was in practice and then doing some part-time teaching. Yeah.
And now you have a mental health clinic in St. Cloud called Processus.
Yep.
Am I pronouncing it
Yeah,
right?
that was it.
And work with, I'm guessing, couples, individuals.
Yep, some groups, but mostly individuals and some couples.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, intimacy is such a very big topic, and as I said, such a important topic to most of us. Your definition that you shared with me just a bit ago is such a wonderful, short, to the point, honest definition. Tell me again how you define it.
Well, what I really wanted to do was to keep the subject simple, but it doesn't make it easy to do. Okay. But I define intimacy as basically investing your energy in 2 things: knowing and being known. So that if I'm in any kind of difficult situation, often what I want to do sometimes is I want to try to run from it, or I want to try to attack the situation somehow or make it be different. But instead of doing those 2 things, I say, let's see if I can just simply let myself be known and do the best job I can at seeing the other person as clearly as I can.
So in a sense, you're letting go of controlling
That's the idea.
Outcome.
Exactly.
That's hard to do, though.
That's difficult. That's difficult. I read somewhere once about 4 rules of living. Show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and let go of the outcome. And that's that number 4 that's the tough one sometimes. Yeah.
You know, when I was thinking today about intimacy, I wondered if, in fact, you think all people yearn for more intimacy, or do some people say, ooh, no, it's too sticky, it's too hard, I'd rather be more of a loner?
Well, I think both of those are true. In other words, I think that yearning for intimacy is something that's just deep in our hearts.
Like a biological need almost?
I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. And I think what happens is that we get burnt with intimacy, with our attempts at it. We get hurt, and I think sometimes our reaction to that is to kind of try to shy away from it. But when we do, I think we still find something in us that keeps wanting to drag us back into that arena.
So the person who had a horrible relationship usually gets into another relationship after.
Sure, eventually.
After some time.
They'll promise themselves. One of the things I see a lot is I see people saying, "Never again," and maybe a year down the road or 2, there they are.
Although there's also the phenomena of jumping back real fast before you have a chance to heal from the breakup, the divorce, the ending. That's also common, isn't it?
Yeah, I think what happens is we get scared.
Scared of being
Scared
alone.
of being alone. Being alone, being abandoned, adrift in the universe, sort of. That's one of the universal fears, I think, along with feeling like we're not good enough or something like that.
And our society, I think, has such a emphasis too on couples and maybe doesn't give enough value to relationships that are not the coupled kind.
And I think people, sometimes single folks find themselves feeling like third wheels, and some things like that. Although, frankly, I'm seeing less of that than, say 10 years ago. Yeah.
When do you think that shifted? Because I agree.
There's been a lot of emphasis, I think. I think my field has something to do with this. The emphasis on really emphasizing the individual's growth and development. And in fact, some of what I'm trying to do now is bring it back, you know,
Perhaps
in some ways,
the
to say,
pendulum swings too far.
you know, one path to growth certainly is to focus inward on our own issues and on our own becoming more autonomous in the world and feeling good about ourselves and things like that. And yet, I believe it's such a rich path to wholeness to enter into relationship, and it's messy. I mean, you mentioned that it's not as easy to organize a life by yourself as it might, or with people, as it would be to organize a life by yourself. But there's so much richness and so many opportunities to learn and grow from that.
In terms of some of the risks, before we move on
Sure.
to some of the benefits, what do you think is the greatest risk that you hear people who come to you in your counseling practice verbalize, maybe
Yeah.
indirectly? But what is most fearful,
Well,
do you think?
I think we're afraid of being hurt. And I think it probably goes deeper than that. But at the level that I hear people speaking about it, it's, I'm afraid I'll get hurt. And I think what that gets translated into is, I'm afraid that if I get hurt, I'll start to devalue myself. I'll start to feel a sense of shame, a sense of powerlessness, a sense of unworthiness. And those can be excruciating for us, you know, those feelings.
Yeah, and I suppose most people have been hurt, and
I don't know anyone.
exactly
Yeah.
some of the pain.
Yeah,
that's
I don't
involved.
think it's possible to be in relationship without hurting each other sometimes.
You had some interesting sort of diagrams that you sent me about the difference between being in a relationship in a healthy way and then the kind of merging style that happens for a lot of couples where they want to sort of be one all the time.
Yeah.
Speak to that a little bit,
Okay,
because I think
sure.
that's what some people think about when they think about intimacy.
In fact, you know, sometimes they even talk about the mathematics of that, two people becoming one.
Right, and
And
churches we hear
Exactly,
that.
exactly. And see, I think there's a really beautiful truth to that. However, I think we misunderstand it sometimes. In other words, the truth is that we are one at some level, at some fundamental level. And yet what happens is, in our efforts, especially in young love, to try to become one, is that we confuse oneness with sameness. And so we try to become the same. And that doesn't work, because then that violates the uniqueness, you know, of each of us.
And I think along with that goes wanting to have the other person think the same as you do
Exactly.
too, which
Think
gets
the
real
same, feel
dangerous.
the same, because if we feel differently, maybe there's something wrong with what I'm thinking or feeling. I think that's the logic of it, again, I think.
Or it gets irritating to have someone expressing other opinions if you have the expectation that we should be one.
Right. Or wanting something different from what I want. In other words, sometimes when we get married, we see in the movies, you know, we see the riding off into the sunset stuff. And what we see, we kind of imagine that riding off into the sunset just goes on that way. And we sometimes get surprised at how different our partners are from us. And, oh, I didn't know you wanted life to be this way. I thought you wanted it just the way I wanted it. And so there's some real challenge there in the coming together with those differences. And excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the intimacy means not so much that everything's hunky-dory all the time. What it means is it has something to do with what we do when things aren't hunky-dory. In other words, it's that process of how we speak with each other, how we work together to find win-win possibilities, for example. And that's where the intimacy is. That's where the growth and the learning takes place, I think.
I heard, when you say win-win, I want to throw out an interesting
sure.
sort of side comment. I heard a counselor once say that we often think of a relationship as kind of a tennis game where one person is on one side of the net and the other on the other, of course. And so when one makes a point, the other loses. But he said win-win is a much better, you know, model, of course,
Exactly.
where you're both on the same side of the the net, you're playing doubles against the issue,
Exactly.
the problem.
Exactly.
Isn't that
so that you become a team yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so often the arguments become a real battle to see who's right.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Right,
wise person once
right.
said to me, well, we can choose. We can be right or we can be happy.
That's good.
Yeah.
Speaking of being
Uh-huh.
right,
Uh-huh.
one of the things that you wrote is that we often invest energies in controlling ourselves and manipulating each other when we're in this fusion
Yeah,
kind
this
of
kind of merging.
merging
Yes.
relationship.
So rather than knowing and being known, we invest our energy in trying to control myself so that I can be more like you, or trying to control you, perhaps more often, so that you can be more like me.
Could you give us a real-life example, James, of this control
Okay.
thing?
Okay. One of the big issues in most marriages has something to do with the closeness-distance issue. Okay? It's almost like couples have thermostat wars. You know, one couple wants everything to be really warm and cozy, and the other one needs it to be a little cooler to feel comfortable. Okay? And so couples can get into, the person who wants it warmer can get into badgering the other person, you know, almost kind of nagging for more attention, more closeness, you know, more engagement of some
sort. It feels like
sort.
nagging,
It
I'm
feels
sure,
like
to
nagging.
the person who wants it
Exactly.
cooler.
Yeah, it's not knowing. See, knowing, or knowing and being known means that I would speak to you about how I'm feeling and what's going on with me, and really pretty deeply come from the place of you are free, you know, to respond how you choose to that. But I want to kind of let you know about where I am and what I'm feeling. But the nagging is sort of a tugging on someone. It's sort
different.
of, yeah, exactly. There's kind of a command in there, you know.
But there's
Okay.
a fine line, I think, between accepting the other person as they are and working to get your needs met.
Exactly.
So if
And that is the dance.
need more
Yes.
closeness
Yep.
and your partner needs more aloneness,
Yep.
how do you keep from being a nag if you're the one who wants more closeness?
Yeah. I find that it's really important to make the distinction between self-disclosure and negotiation. Okay? In a self-disclosure, I'm simply wanting to share how I feel and who I am with you. Okay? And a negotiation is that I really want to talk with you about a difference in our needs here, or a problem that I'm having, and I want to work it out in some sort of win-win way. The problem is that often we're not explicit about the fact that we're trying to negotiate. And so it becomes kind of an implicit, sort of unclear thing going on between people. And so the negotiation, when it's very explicit, is simply, I really do need some more closeness here. And then to try to be as specific as I can. You know, is that time? I need some time for us to be alone for a while. I need whatever, you know, that sort of thing.
And that's also being self-disclosing, right?
That's a self-disclosure. That's because when I do that, when I talk about what I'm wanting, I'm opening myself to the possibility that you'd say, well, that's dumb, you know, or that sort of thing. I'm kind of trying to reveal.
How would this, though, not feel like nagging to the other person, because you're still hoping, at least,
Exactly.
if not pushing,
Uh-huh.
to have a change?
To the best of our ability. Now, I don't know anybody who's perfect at this, okay, first of all. But to the best of our ability, what we do is we get permission to have a negotiation. I don't just lay one on you. You know, so maybe at the start I say something like, you know, I want to talk about something. I want to negotiate something. You know, and so I have a permission between us that we're having that kind of conversation. Okay, that's first of all.
So you're putting it on the table, so
Exactly.
to speak. It's not like a hidden kind of a dance, a game,
Exactly.
a
Exactly.
plan. Okay.
And then it becomes very important for me to do two things. One is to speak as clearly as I can about what it is that I'm desiring. as openly and honestly as I can about that, and to honor that, and then to honor however you feel about it. And so that both people, your position and mine, both get honored. And so we don't get into the win-lose kind of conversation where I'm trying to put down what you want to make what I want better. In other words, we honor both of the wants and then try to figure out how to get both of them met. So it's that kind of stance.
Do you think, James, that when people do this and really accept and hear the other person, that the other person is more likely then to be able to be giving, and you are able to be giving to the other?
Because it feels like friends then. We're friends working on this together rather than enemies trying to get something from the other.
We're on the same side of the net.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
You had another kind of related, interesting concept that I had never seen anything quite put like this in terms of relationships, but you called it the economics of relationship.
Yeah.
And I want to just read a sentence here and then have you comment on it.
Sure.
The scarcity model, you see, invites a self-defeating approach to relationships. For example, when we try to get what we want by taking it, we treat others as objects and seldom satisfy the heart's desire. Scarcity model, as opposed to the model of abundance.
Of abundance, exactly.
Tell us more about that.
Okay, so in relationship as in life, I think this would apply in a more broad way as well. But that notion that there's not enough, and I think sometimes people approach life as I'm not enough. Okay, but there's not enough resource, there's not enough time, there's not enough love, not enough money. But often in relationships it's that there's not enough love.
Right.
There's not enough love. And so I try to grab for it. And when I grab, the automatic response from the other person is to do something like this.
To back
because
off.
they're being taken from. They have that feeling. And so I talk about a process of giving and having, and a process of receiving and having. But taking leads to not having. That leads to not.
Taking leads to not having.
To not having. We almost always wind up feeling empty. Like I grabbed for something and darn it, I didn't get it. Because deep down, we don't want compliance from our partner. What we want is their love. And that's very different than obedience or compliance.
You kind of summed it up by saying, when we give freely without expectation, we have. When we receive freely without obligation, we have. Now this sounds wonderful, but I'm sure some people listening are saying, this is idealistic.
It is incredibly idealistic. Yeah.
This isn't how it is at my house.
Yeah.
How do you think people, though, can get closer to this? Like you said, nobody does it perfectly.
Sure. Well, that's the purpose of, I'm sorry, Mary. That's the purpose of ideals. It kind of gives us something to kind of shoot for. And so small phrases like that kind of orient me again. So they help me, when I get off track, because I get into scarcity. I get into feeling like there's not enough time and not enough love, and I start grabbing for it and feeling empty inside. And things like that help me just sort of orient myself again and kind of stay on track, particularly that and the knowing and being known.
So think of it as a wonderful goal instead of unrealistic expectation for your marriage or your relationship.
Yeah, a way to focus our energies. Yeah.
Are there some tips? Is such a trite word, but are there some other tips you have, James, for getting closer to intimacy? I mean, we've alluded to a lot, but
well, we've talked a lot about the being known, the self-disclosure, but it might make some sense to talk about the other half. How we open our hearts to the uniqueness of another person. Okay.
Say some more about that.
Yeah. We are each a one of a kind. There'll never be another you. Never be another me. Some people would say, thank goodness. And I think what we sometimes do is I look at you, or I look at my partner, and often I look at my partner in terms of what it is that I need from him or her. Okay? And in doing so, I don't see them. I still just see me. You know, I still just see me. And so that invitation to just remind myself, well, what is she really feeling? What is he really feeling? What is he wanting? What's important to him? Not that I have to go do it immediately or give up who I am to cater to that, but simply so that I know. So that I know, because it's so easy for us to label people, to judge, to put a preconceived notion, you know, on someone. You know, if I'm judging myself, which often I am, sometimes I can imagine that you're doing that to me. You know,
so self-esteem things
exactly
get in the way, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
But by tuning into the other person's needs, you really are forgetting about yourself in a sense.
In a sense, for the time being. It's like I say, okay, I know that I'm hungry for this or that, but let me listen to you for a bit. Let me see how you're feeling. Let me just understand where you're coming from. Because unless it really works for both of us, it won't work for either of us.
Do you think that all of this is more inherently easy for women to get, or do you think we have just not given credit to men who are working at all this equally hard?
I think both of those statements are true, Mary.
Do you?
I think both are true. I think women get socialized for relationship pretty early on. My daughter is 7 years old, and the kinds of things that the kind of activities that she's getting into often have to do with who's included and who's not, and all of this talk about feelings, and there's lots of little uproars, and you're not my friend anymore, and then 10 minutes later you are.
Real social kind of stuff. Huh?
And little boys are out, you know, playing guns and shooting and making noises and things like that. And so I do think that you get a real head start on us with that. And I also believe, particularly later in life, I'm seeing a lot of men in midlife who are coming around to saying, boy, I've been missing out on intimacy, you know, for my whole life, and I really want to learn about this.
I've had several men friends say it's so much easier to talk to a woman friend than to talk to a guy friend. And that probably is not unusual, right?
Not at all. No. No. I think that's one of the losses for men. That, in fact, one person did some analysis on this, the statistic that women live 7 years longer. Basically, her conclusion from this was that the reason women live longer is that they have women as friends.
You know, I heard a similar kind of a report. It almost sounds like a joke, but it was done in Norway with 10,000 men. And the study, though, found that the men who had the best cardiovascular history were men who had more than 2 or 3 good friends they could call anytime, night or day.
That makes perfect sense to me.
That was telling.
Yeah.
You're going to be speaking at a convention that's coming up, and can you just tell us a little bit about that? It's something that goes on every year, so some of the audience who see this show will have to think ahead to 2000.
Yeah, it's typically the first week of August at River Falls, Wisconsin. It's the International Institute of Integral Human Sciences, which is a big, long name, and it's a really just very, very interesting convention of people.
They pull in people from all over the country, right?
All over the country.
The phrase I hear, or the title I hear, is Midwest Odyssey. Is
yes, that's what they
put on the screen.
That's what they call it. Yep. And I'm doing a 4-day workshop called the Alchemy of Intimacy. The notion being that love heals. That intimacy, very much with that study you read about, you know, in Norway, you know, that if you want something to grow, if you want something to change, you need to love it first. You know.
Do you think we need to start teaching our kids more about intimacy at the grade school level, James? you know, it's such a complex thing. As I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm thinking, well, you really are a graduate student in this whole field, but most of us are still, you know, down the rung a bit. And would it help if we started talking to kids in a more structured way, do you think? Or does it have to come via home and friendship worlds?
I think we need all of them, Mary. I think, for example, I know that I can't tell my children about intimacy if I'm not doing it. In other words, so they really need to see it and to learn that way. But I think there really is something to be gained by teaching it more formally, particularly since we're learning more and more about it.
That'd be an exciting thing
sure
to
would.
try and get going.
Yeah.
We have a couple of phone numbers that we're going to put on the screen now for you that will be resource numbers. The first one is this convention that Jim is going to be part of, the Midwest Odyssey Convention. If you want to know more about it, it's coming up soon for those of you who are seeing this before August 3rd. The number to call is 612-934-6516 or www.midwestodyssey.com. Now, probably a more important number for most of you, though, is to jot down James Breyer's number if you would like to talk to him. And that number is in St. Cloud, 320-252-2976. Well, thank you so very much
I
for
really enjoyed this.
coming down here and sharing some of your wisdom, really. This is such a complicated topic, as I think we all appreciate. Have you felt that you have grown just by studying this field to be able to be more
That's
present?
that's been my way, to try to learn about it and then try to put it into practice. But the most important learnings have been sort of in the laboratory of real life. You know, really stumbling and falling and failing and picking myself up again and trying again and learning from each experience. We teach each other so much.
It's comforting to know that it's a process.
Oh, for sure.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. And thank you for being with us. We'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.